The following is a summary of the Sicha which the Rebbe said on Parshas Chayei Sorah Tov Shin Nun Beis. This was the opening and the beginning of the Kinus Hashluchim Ho'elami, the international gathering of Shluchim. The beginning and the opening of the Kinus Hashluchim Ho'elami needs to lay a foundation and make clear the purpose of the Shluchim in our generation in general, and especially delineate the novelty of the Shlichus in this moment. And that is that our Shlichus is lekabel pnei Mashiach tzidkenu, to receive the face of Mashiach with the gula hamitis v'hashlema, with the true and complete redemption. We've spoken many times that in addition to the general shlichus of every single yid, that every yid is a shliach, an emissary of Hashem, ani nivresi l'shamesh eskoini, I am created in order to serve my master. And especially when we're talking about the shluchim of the Rebbe, which is a nukuda mushutefes, a general and joint point which is relevant at all times. From time to time, however, there is a chidush, a novelty in the shlichus itself. And that chidush, that novelty, becomes the gateway through which all other matters of the shlichus rise. And as far as we're concerned, the main and principal novelty, which is not only a detail in the shlichus or even a general point in the shlichus, but it is the most important principle of the whole of Yiddishkeit, the shlichus is the preparation to receive the face of Mashiach, and that encompasses all the details and everything about shlichus. We've spoken many times, and especially in the last months, that according to that which Chazal say, Kolu kol hakitzin, all the end times for the coming of Mashiach have passed, and as the Rebbe Nasi Dereinu has said, that we have already done teshuvah, and we have already polished the buttons. Therefore, our avodah, our service now, is to be prepared literally to receive Mashiach b'poel mamash. So, from that we may understand that this has to be the whole point of the Kinus, to speak with each other and to make good decisions how we can actually bring that shlichus about, to be mekabel pnei Mashiach tzidkenu. The connection between the avodas hashlichus and Mashiach will be understood through understanding the connection between Mashiach and the whole idea of shlichus. There is a pasuk when Hashem told Moshe to take the Bnei Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, and Moshe was remonstrating with Hashem. Moshe said to Hashem, Shlach na b'yad tishlach. In other words, send with whom you will send. Chazal say that Moshe said to Hashem, Ribono shel olam, Shlach na b'yad tishlach, send the person who ultimately will redeem the Yidden, and that is Mashiach. In other words, he should be the one that should also take them out of Mitzrayim. So, since Moshe used the word tishlach, which is the idea of shlichus, therefore we can understand that Mashiach has the parameters of a shliach. he is a shliach, an emissary to redeem. What was the reason why Moshe requested this from Hashem? So Rashi says, Biyad acher shetirtze l'shloach, send another person whom eventually will redeem them, because I, says Moshe, won't lead them into the land. And you have many shluchim. However, this itself requires explanation. Moshe surely knew that Hashem would send Mashiach to redeem Yidden at the end of time. And nevertheless, he requests that Mashiach be sent now to redeem the Yidden. Why did Moshe request that? And if Moshe did request that, and Moshe's coming from a position of Chochmah Dikdusha, holy wisdom, why wasn't his request accepted? The answer is that in fact, since this was a request of Moshe, his request was accepted. As it says that Moshe, he is the Goel Rishon, and he is the Goel Acharon. He is the first Redeemer, and he is the last Redeemer. In other words, the intention of Moshe was to connect the first Redeemer with the last Redeemer. So, although they would be actually two different people, and in fact stemming from different tribes, Moshe was from the tribe of Levi and Mashiach from the tribe of Yehuda, nevertheless their joint shlichus would be fused. We'll be able to understand this by inspecting the very first shlichus which is mentioned in the Torah, in our parsha of Chayei, which was the shlichus of Eliezer to achieve the shidduch between Yitzchak and Rivka. We can investigate what type of shlichus did Eliezer have. Some say that he was a shliach l'kiddushin. He was sent as a shliach in order to betroth Rivka, that she should be betrothed to Yitzchak. And shluchei shel adam kamoisai, the shliach of the person is like the person who is sending him. In that itself, there are numerous levels in the shlichus, as Rabbi Yosef Engel delineates 3 general levels in the shlichus. One, in that the deed of the shliach is like that of the one who is sending him. The second, that the whole power of the shliach is like one who's sending him. And the third, that he is literally like the one who is sending him. So that's the first way of understanding it, that Eliezer was a shliach to betroth Rivka. Or we can say that Eliezer was merely a shadchan. He was merely making the shidduch between Yitzchak and Rivka. He wasn't a shliach for kiddushin. Or even if he was sent to do kiddushin, he was sent as a shadchan. There is room to say that Eliezer in fact was not a shliach, but it was something separate. Like a shadchan, as we understood from the shidduch itself between Yitzchak and Rivka, Eliezer actually wanted that his own daughter should marry Yitzchak, and it was only when Avram told him that my son is blessed and you are cursed, that he understood that he was something separate and he needed to go and achieve a shlichus, a shidduch for his master. Furthermore, Eliezer, had to find himself the way to achieve this. He davened, he made certain signs. Avram just told him, don't take a daughter from the daughters of Canaan, but he didn't tell him exactly how to achieve finding and making this shidduch. So therefore, there is room to say that in fact he was not a shliach, he was just a shadchan, and therefore he had to use his own mind of how to achieve that. However, from a different point of view, Eliezer was the elder of Avram's house. He was the servant of Avram. He kept all the words of his master. His master made him take an oath by saying Simna Yodcha, placing his hand underneath his thigh, to swear that he would actually achieve the shlichus. So from this perspective, he was actually a shliach to betroth Rivka. Furthermore, from the fact that it says Vayikach ha'eved asara gemalim, that Eliezer took 10 camels, v'chol tuv adonov biyodoi, and everything which belonged to Avram he took in his hand. In other words, he had in his possession everything of his master, and he was in control of it all. And as Rashi says, he was given a shtar matana, a deed of gift, which was written from Avram to Yitzchak, giving him everything that Avram had, giving it to Yitzchak. And this was given to Eliezer in order that a prospective shidduch should jump on this, because Yitzchak was now fantastically wealthy, having received everything from Avraham. So Eliezer had in his hand this entire thing. He could have torn it up, but he didn't, because he was so given over to Avraham, and therefore it's more likely to say that he actually was a shliach, and his entire being was that of representing Avraham who sent him. We can explain this further by asking a general question, a klotz kasha. It says that Avram gave Yitzchak everything he had. Now, there is a rule in the laws of tzedakah that says that a person should not give all his possessions to tzedakah. He should leave something over for himself. In fact, somebody who does that has transgressed that which the Torah says that one should give mikol asher lo, from one's possessions, but not all one's possessions. That being the case, how come Avram gave everything he had to Yitzchak? If the reason is just so that Yitzchak should be wealthy, so that prospective shidduchim should jump on the suggestion, it would have been enough to give a large sum, or the majority of the sum, to Yitzchak. Why did he give, however, everything? And especially because Avram was only 140 at that time. He was going to live another 35 years. He needed money to be able to provide sustenance for his family. So why give everything at that point to Yitzchak? The answer is that the marriage between Yitzchak and Rivka, the first Jewish marriage in the Torah, is not something individual, is not something private. These aren't just two private individuals getting married. This was the first Jewish marriage after the Bris Milah, and this was going to be the couple that was going to give birth to the entire Jewish nation. It's for that reason that Avram gave everything he had to Yitzchak, because this was going to be the future of the Jewish people. And since Avram Avinu was the first Jew, he therefore gave everything to his son. It wouldn't have been enough, he would have just given most of it, because since this was the whole very being of Avram, to be the the progenitor of the Jewish nation, that's why he gave absolutely everything to Yitzchak. And furthermore, this wedding itself was empowered by Avram, first through the Bris Milah, and second in this shidduch through Eliezer. So he put everything he had into it. And therefore, it's more likely to say that in fact Eliezer wasn't a mere shadchan, but he was a shliach, and his entire being was that of Avram Avinu who sent him. Let's explain this according to the Pnimius Inyonim, the inner depth of the Torah. In the Sefer Likutei Torah, at the end, in Parshas Bracha, the Alter Rebbe explains that the marriage between Yitzchak and Rivka is in fact a very general and important foundational marriage. And it affects the entire chain order of creation. As it reflects in a person's service of Hashem, it reflects something called Yichud Ma Ban, the union of Ma and Ban. Ma and Ban. Ma represents Yitzchak, the soul, and Ban represents Rivka, the body. So the union of the soul and the body of each Jew happens through the marriage between Yitzchak and Rivka. They will be joined together with Hashem, in other words, the soul and the body joined together and fused together, and together they will be married to Hashem. The betrothal of the Jewish people to Hashem started at the giving of the Torah and will be complete when Mashiach will come. And the whole avodah of a Jew in Torah and mitzvahs nowadays is in order to effect this union of Ma and Ban, of body and soul. It started by Matan Torah because the novelty of Matan Torah was that the gezerah, the decree that says that the upper world shouldn't go down to the lower and the lower shouldn't ascend to the higher, was abolished. And power was given to fuse Gashmias and Ruchnias, material and spiritual, until one can make a Chefza Shel Kedusha, a physical item, a holy item. And the ultimate will be, and the completion of that will be L'Asad Lavi, when Mashiach will come. That's why the Torah goes at great length to tell us of the Shidduch. And it tells us again and again, because the whole Shlichus of Eliezer was to effect this Yichud, this union of Yitzchak and Rivka, of body and soul. Rivka was a Shoshana ben HaChoichim. She was a rose amongst the thorns. She lived in the diaspora, in Padan Aram. That represents Ban, the body. The Shlichus of Eliezer was to extract her from there and to raise her to the level of Eretz Yisrael, where Yitzchak was, the level of Ma, and to become one with Yitzchak and give birth to the Jewish people in all generations. And therefore, this Shlichus of Eliezer was giving power to the Yichud, the union of Ma and Ban, of Yitzchak and Rivka, and that in Avodas Hashem started at Matan Torah and will finish with the Geula. This Shlichus, this general Shlichus, is hinted to when Eliezer said, Eved Avraham Anochi, I am a servant of Avraham, because it was from Avraham that started the preparation for Matan Torah. So the fact that Eliezer said he was the Eved of Avraham is the preparation to that which it says by Matan Torah, Tavdun es Elokim al harazeh, you will serve me on this mountain. So the Avdus, the fact that Eliezer was a servant and Avraham is the beginning process of the preparation for Matan Torah, prepares for our being servants of Hashem. However, the above still requires deeper explanation. If the whole marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka, Yichud Ma and Ban, is such an important principle, then how come the Torah goes at great length to describe the shidduch between the two, but doesn't go at great length to tell us about the marriage itself. It tells us more about the preparation for the shidduch rather than the actual marriage itself. From this, we may therefore understand that the shlichus itself, the sending of Eliezer itself, is noigeya, it's important to the whole principle over here. Why? Why was it important, the idea of shlichus? And this will explain why Eliezer was a shliach and not just a shadchan. Because in order to achieve the union of ma and ban, of Yitzchak and Rivka, of body and soul, there has to be that element by the person who is achieving it. From one side, that person has to be a metzius bifnei atzmoi, a separate being, a ban, a bardas, person who should use their own mind, and from the other side, that person needs to be completely nullified to the one who is sending him. And that is achieved specifically by a shliach. Because a shliach has these two opposite ideas. On the one hand, he is a bardas, he needs to use his own mind, acumen, in order to achieve the shlichus. From the other side, there's complete bittul, nullification to the one who is sending him. He cannot change anything or any instruction of the meshalech, of the one who is sending him, and his whole success depends on the empowerment of the meshalech, of the one who is sending him. And that itself is the idea of yichud, ma and ban. The soul, ma, is connected with Hashem. Neshama shanasata b'tahori. This soul is pure. It's a chelek eloka mimal, a veritable part of Hashem. And when that pure soul comes down into a physical body, ban, it's in order to achieve this union of soul and body, so that the body, although it feels itself as something independent, nevertheless, it's illuminated by the light of the soul, and it becomes nullified to that light, to the extent that they fuse together through the avodah of Torah and mitzvahs, to the extent that everything that a person does, one can hear within it that union of body and soul together with Hashem, shluchai shaladam kamoisai. That's the reason why Eliezer was dafka a shliach, because a shliach represents this union of ma and ban, and he specifically represents the meshalech, the one who sends him. And now we understand why Avraham Avinu gave Yitzchak everything he has, because in order to achieve this yichud, this union between Yitzchak and Rivka, the body and the soul, ma and ban, and to bring it to completion with the Geula, that includes the whole chain order of creation. And that's why he gave him everything he has, because that was the empowerment to achieve it. With this, we can explain something which is actually very interesting. This explanation which is given in Likutei Torah is not given by the Alter Rebbe in Parshas Chayei, which would have been in the Sefer Torah. Rather, it's given in the Sefer Likutei Torah and at the end of Likutei Torah in the Parsha of Zos HaBracha. So, from the very location of this explanation, that it's at the end of Likutei Torah, we can understand that here is hinted to that the complete union of ma and ban will come after all the Aveda has been achieved, and after there comes the drushim of Shir Hashirim, which is the complete marriage of the Yidden and Hashem, which will take place in time to come. If we have a look at the beginning of the Sefer Likutei Torah, where we have the Parsha of Vayikra. There, at the very beginning of Likutei Torah, the Alter Rebbe talks about a Yid being a shliach from above. He's the shluchei shel Adam ha'elyon, the emissary of Hashem. That's the beginning of the Avodah. And at the end of Likutei Torah, he talks about the completion of that Avodah. So now we get the connection between Mashiach and Shaliach. Mashiach is the Shaliach who will bring about a complete union of Ma and Ban, of body and soul, of spirit and the material, creating a Dira la Yisbarach b'tachtonim, a dwelling place for Hashem in the lowest of all worlds. And in Mashiach himself, he must be also a Shaliach. On the one hand, he's a flesh and blood. He is an independent human being, a king from the house of David, and he will wage wars, the wars of Hashem. So from this we may understand that there's going to be opposition to him, and he has to wage a war to fight that battle of Hashem. And at the same time, he is Shluchei Shel Adam Ha'elyon Kamoisei Mamish. He literally is completely nullified and represents Hashem in achieving this. So in order for Mashiach to achieve the yichud of Ma and Ban by Yidden, he himself has to have these two ideas of a shliach fused within himself. So we now understand why Moshe Rabbeinu prayed Shlach na b'yad tishlach. He asked that Mashiach be the one that takes them out. And in fact, his request was achieved. Moshe himself is the level of Chochmah, Torah. Moshe Kibbel Torah Misinai. Moshe was the one that received the Torah. Mashiach himself, his principal idea is Malchus, is kingship. So it's rather like the difference between a mashpia. A mashpia is the one who gives wisdom, and a makabel, a receiver, the idea of Malchus, the idea of the sun and the moon. Moshe, he is the source of all hashpa, of all influence. From him came the koyach for the geula, but Mashiach, who is the goyel achron, he finished off the avodah, and he has also the advantage of the receiver, because he receives all the influences from above, and in fact, being the receiver, he actually goes to a higher level than the mashpia, rather like the advantage of the body over the soul. That specifically in the body do you have the koyach ha'atzmos, so much so that le'osid lavi, in time to come, the soul will derive nourishment from the body, and that's why Mashiach will bring the geula. So the request of Moshe actually achieved the fusion of both of these together. That in Mashiach himself you have the two identities. On the one hand, he's a melech, and he's also a rav. He's the melech, and he's the rav, he's the teacher who teaches everybody Torah. And that's why Mashiach is shliach plus yud. In gematria, in the numerical value, shliach plus another 10 equals the gematria of Mashiach. Because the shliach has to use his eser koichas hanefesh, his 10 soul powers, and the ultimate revelation of Mashiach will be when he will act as a shliach. Now we know that within each and every yid there is a level of Moshe, and there is an element of Mashiach. And therefore, in every single yid, we have a fusion of both Moshe and Mashiach. In general, the whole avodah of a yid is to be a shliach. L'shamish es koinoi, to serve Hashem, to shine godliness in the world. So that can be in one of two ways. Either he can be a mashpia, a shemesh, a sun, or he can be a makabel, a receiver, like a levana, which is the idea of the reflective light. And we find that avoida by a shaliach. On the one hand, there's a bittul to the mashaleach, that's the levana, the moon, which just receives. On the other hand, there is the metzias bifnei atzmoi, the independent being of the shliach, that's the sun. And since Mashiach and Moshe are united in being the Goel Rishon and the Goel Achron, the first and last Redeemer, and every single Yid has the elements within of both Moshe and Mashiach, therefore, within every single Yid, these two come together as the Shliach. And that, in fact, is hinted to in the word Shemesh, which means the sun. On the one hand, the Shemesh is mashpia, it gives light to the earth. On the other hand, it's the idea of the bittul l'shamesh es koini. Now, since the koyach of shlichus comes from the very first shlichus in the Torah, we can therefore understand that just like in this first shlichus, Avraham Avinu gave everything he had, so too in the shlichus of every individual, they receive from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is the Mashalech, the one sending the shliach, everything that they need for the shlichus. They have the koyach of atzmus in order to achieve the shlichus. And everything they do is permeated with this one idea to reveal Mashiach Tzidkenu, the ultimate yichud of Ma and Ban. This is all emphasized in our generation, when there is a novelty in the shlichus. The novelty of our generation is that the Rebbe appointed each one in this generation to be a shliach, to spread Yiddishkeit, and to spread the mayones Chassidus, the teachings of Chassidus, in order to achieve the Geula. We actually see it's much easier nowadays to ask a person to have an effect on others, even a person who really is not affiliated in any way. It's easier today to say to them that in addition to their own private avodah, they should take responsibility also to have an effect on others, their family, their friends, wider community, etc. And especially those amongst Klal Yisrael who have merited to be Shluchim of the Rebbe, who their avodah is 24/7 to bring the Geula. And certainly when we're at a Kinus of Shluchim, which a Kinus brings a benefit to them and to the world, a true benefit to the world, meaning to the Helam, to the concealment of the world, revealing light within it. That's a Kinus Oilami, a Kinus which illuminates the Helam, the concealment of the world. However, within that, which is applicable every year, there is a Chidush this year in the connection of the avodah of the shlichus together with the shlichus of Mashiach. Shlach no bi'ad tishlach. The Rebbe has told us that we've finished the entire avodah. Imdu hachin kulchem. Just stand prepared to receive Mashiach. We see in the world many simonim, many signs of the Geula. The simon given in the Yalkut Shimoni, the Higiaz Man Gulaschem, your time for redemption has arrived. The nations who were warring with each other, especially the Arab nations. And there has already been achieved the Niflois Arenu, seeing the great wonders. And additionally in this year, Niflois Ba Ubbe Soicha, within it. And we see that Niflois are the Muhusa, the very being, the Toich and the content and the Neshama and the soul of this year. And we see B'Poel that Yilcha Milchamas Hashem v'Yinatzech. Mashiach is waging the war of Hashem and he's being successful. He's winning them. And in a way, in many instances, of a peaceful war. And in an eternal way, Nitzachon from the idea of Nitzchios. The Nun being the Shar Hanun, the gateway of 50, the Tzaddik, the Shnas HaTzaddik, the 90th year, and the Ches, the revelation of Mashiach, which is connected to the number 8. And since the Shluchim are long after the beginning of their Shlichus, and long after the middle of their Shlichus, and they've in fact finished their Shlichus, and nevertheless the Gula has not yet come, we must say that there's something still left in order to achieve the coming of Mashiach. And that is, it's well known that in every single generation, one person is born from the seed of Yehuda, that person is befitting of becoming the Mashiach for Yidden. And according to that which the Rebbe Nasi Dereinu has told us, that the only one Shliach in our generation, and he is the only one Mashiach in our generation, that we've finished everything, it's understood that we're already starting the fulfillment of Shlach No Bi'ad Tishlach, the Shlichus of the Rebbe. And therefore, it's understood that the only thing that is left is to be Mekabel Pnei Mashiach Tzidkeinu B'Poel Mamash, in order that he should fulfill his Shlichus literally and take Yidden out of Galus. And this is emphasized on Shabbos Parshas Chayei when we have a Kinus of the Shluchim. When we read about the Shlichus of Eliezer, which gives empowerment for all matters of Shlichus, especially the Shlichus of Mashiach Tzidkeinu. And it's also the Shabbos Mevorchim Kislev, the month of Geula, the month of Matan Torah, of Pnimis HaTorah. In addition, rain is connected with the Shlichus of Mashiach. Milamata Lamaila, from below above, which is the idea of the moon, because Eid Yalam in Ha'aretz, steam rises from the earth is ban, the guf, the body. In other words, there's that which is arising from below, from the Gashmias and the Chumrias, becomes steam, which is a refined element, and it goes up higher and higher, higher than the Ruach of Mashiach, which is hovering over the waters. And from there, we have the Techiyah, the resurrection of the soul of the Rebbe, B'Poel Mamash, coming as an neshama in a body, not just the spirit of Mashiach, but Mashiach as soul inside a body. So from this we have the lesson from the Kinus Hashluchim, and that is, the very first thing is that we need to announce to all the Shluchim that the avodah of each one in this generation is to receive Mashiach. As it says what the title of the Kinus is, Kol Yemei Chayecha L'Havi L'Meisa Mashiach, all the days of your life are in order to bring Mashiach. That every person does everything that he possibly can, not just to bring Cheskas Mashiach, a potential Mashiach, but literally to bring Mashiach. Simply this means that we should take good decisions. How? Every single shlich can prepare himself, his place, his city, to receive Mashiach through explaining to them Mashiach matters as they are explained in the written law, in the oral law, but oifen hamiskabel, in an acceptable manner to each person according to their understanding, which includes especially learning about Mashiach and Geula, especially in a way of Chachma, Bina, and Das. And since this is the avodah which is connected to our time now, there are no exceptions to this avodah. Everybody is obligated to do this. V'yehi ratzon, that through keeping this shlichus with our 10 soul powers, and especially when the shluchim gather together and they invest themselves in this, then for sure, immediately we will have the revelation of Mashiach, together with his 10 soul powers, Shlach no, the Shliach of our generation, the Rebbe, and as he was in the previous generation, one with his father being the only son of his father, and the other previous generations, all the 7 generations, the 7 branches of the menorah. And the main thing is that since we've already completed the avodah of the shlichus, each shliach will come to the true Meshaleach, who is Hashem, and will say to Hashem, I have done my shlichus, and now, kavayachol, it's time to do your shlichus. Because Hashem is also a shliach, as it says, Magid Devarav Li'ankov, and together with the 10 spheres, Atzmos Mahus is Mashiach Tzidkenu, will come and send us Mashiach Tzidkenu literally. And even if there's a doubt that Hashem wants us to linger a little bit further in Golus, in order to receive a nachas ruach, a pleasure from our avodah, a Yid cries out, no, everything that the Baal Habayis tells you to do, you should do apart from going out. In other words, we do not want to stay away 1 minute longer from the table of our Father in heaven, and we ask, please send the Geula in this year of Yad Shlachna b'Yad Tishlach. Yad Tishlach is Tafshin Nun Beis, in order to bring the Geula. And together with the Shleimus of Avodah of Mashiach, as explained at the end of Parshas Bracha, we have the complete marriage, as explained in Shir HaShirim, especially if we will take on good decisions to learn all parts of Torah, Oir, and Likutei Torah until the very end, Shir HaShirim included, which their limud quickens the drawing down and achievement of all the above, until Nekeva to Seviv Gover, Hashem comes and thanks every single Yid for their Avodah, even if it's not complete Avodah, but he brings them all to Eretz HaKodesh, to Yerushalayim Har HaKodesh, to the Har HaKodesh, to the Bayis HaShlishi, Teikef Umiyad Mamash.